Good Friday morning to all of you. This is Jenna, the host of the Faces of Grand Prairie podcast. And as you know, if you've been following the podcast, I have been doing a series on what I've been calling the mechanics of government or Government 101. But really, what I'm doing is trying to help everyone understand better the idea of civics. And the civics is the study of government and how government functions. And this is something that used to be taught very heavily in schools and isn't really taught so much anymore. And the reason that I'm trying to, get the word out about why it's important is that the more that we understand how our government functions, the better off we will be in how to either support it or help to change it as the citizens that live in a particular municipality. And what I've been focusing on mainly is local city government. And I've been fortunate enough to have a city that is really willing to have conversations with me about how their particular either position functions or their department functions, and what type of authority are they given by the different documents that we have to abide by when we are doing any type of city management and that type of thing. And maybe one day I'll talk to someone who can help us explain the articles of incorporation of a city, and that every city has them. And that's how a lot of cities are run, is based on their founding documents and how that all started. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is to help educate people in my community about how our local city government works. And today, while I'm not going to be doing any interviews with any candidates running for office, that's not something that I have the ability to do at the moment. One of the reasons is because there's so many this year that are running for different government, different seats in local government, that I just did not have time to get to everyone. And I felt like it would only be fair, and the appropriate thing to do is to give every candidate that's running for every seat the opportunity to sit down with me and have a conversation and explain their platforms. And if I didn't have time to do everyone, I just didn't want to do anyone. And so it's not that in the future that won't be something that I'm very interested in doing. I think it's really important that we get to know people that are running for local city government. But this year, it just wasn't in the cards. And there's just so many of them. Like I said, it was just very hard for me to do that. We also have people that are not only running for city government, but there's also bond packages on our election this year. And then there's also in the future, there'll be county seats that are up for election and state seats that are up for election. And I just did not have the time before this election to go through all that. But what I did want to do today is do a short little a piece on endorsements of candidates, because I'm sure that that's something that you've seen a lot of on Facebook or any type of other social media you follow. It's certainly something that I've seen a lot of, is not only seeing the political signs for the people running, but also who are they being endorsed by. And you'll see a lot of these signs around town or anywhere in any city that you go into, where you see that they're endorsed by certain groups. And what I wanted to do is just to kind of focus your attention on what to look for when it comes to who is being supported by what group and why. So I have 3 questions for you to consider when it comes time to vote for your candidates. So when a candidate says that they're endorsed by a group, this is either a group or a political action committee of that group, which is also known as a PAC. And there are certain organizations that will raise money where it goes into an account that can be dispersed into political candidates that they support. And so when you have a PAC and they say that they're supporting a candidate, oftentimes that candidate will receive money from that PAC. And these are all things that need to be transparent. They are required to provide all the documentation of who pays for their campaigning and how much it is and when they get paid. And so they're not going to just shove that in your face. That's something that, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to. And PACs are not inherently a bad thing. PACs are a way for groups to have a little bit more influence on the inner workings of their city government. And that's not inherently a bad thing. It becomes a bad thing when you don't know why they're supporting certain candidates, how much they're giving, and the real motivations behind why they're supporting them. So, number one, there are you'll see different things, different groups that are running. And a lot of times you might recognize immediately that group is local. Like, let's say that the local police department or the local fire station or the local real estate organization is supporting a specific candidate. And so that's local. But then there's other times that you might see that a candidate is being supported by an organization that you're just not aware of. So one question to ask, number one, is the organization that is endorsing a candidate local or is it larger than local, either statewide or national? If it is local, then one thing that you could do, and this would help everyone to get to know your local organizations better, is to call that organization and find out who the chairperson is of that group and ask why they're supporting that candidate. And they would love to tell you the reasons they have for why they supported that candidate. Obviously, there is a reason that group decided that they were going to be their best fit for that particular group. And when you're thinking about things like, the first responders, they're going to be supporting candidates that help them to have the resources that they need to do their job effectively and that type of thing. But you want to call them and you can certainly say, I'm a local citizen that's a voting citizen. I saw that you endorse so-and-so. Could you just tell me why? And you can also ask them questions about what kind of questions did they ask? How did they come to their decision making? Did they interview all the candidates or just one of the candidates? And just kind of ask them questions. It's not a terrible idea to make sure that our local political action committees know that our citizens understand what's going on and how they made their decisions. Because if they are going to be putting money behind a candidate, that is influencing voter opinion. And so that's something that we need to pay attention to. And it's not, like I said, it's not inherently a bad thing. It's just certainly something that we want to make sure that we're more educated about. So that's one thing. If it's not a local organization and if it's more statewide or even federal wide, the question I would ask is, what interest does that group have in a candidate running in a little town in wherever you live? Especially, some of the larger cities, the motivation might be a little bit more obvious, but the motivation could be that they're just a nonpartisan group that's trying to get more young people involved in politics and to get them to understand how local city government works. That could be a very good reason. There might be other nefarious reasons that that a national organization might throw money or support behind a candidate locally. And that's certainly something that we want to understand. Ask questions like of the candidate. How did you come to be a part of this group? How did they come to contact you? Did you have the motivation to run for candidacy before they contacted you, or did you run for candidacy because they contacted you? We definitely want to make sure the more local that we get with our viewpoints in terms of politics, the more that we can really understand how some of these things work. And we definitely want to know if there's any outside influences that are going to be affecting our local politics and city government. The other thing is making sure to ask how much money that they are providing for that candidate and where is that money going? Campaigns are very expensive, and some of the money that people get goes towards the signs that you see, which are not cheap to print. They would go towards shirts or some type of marketing paraphernalia. But a lot of it now is going towards social media campaigning and that type of thing. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to that. That's very important. And we all need to know who's being endorsed by whom and why. The second question is, why did the candidate win their endorsement? And I talked about this a little bit more. You want to make sure that this is all just something that keeps those political action committees more transparent. And the interesting part about this is that not very many people really question why did an organization support that candidate and endorse that candidate, and just making sure that they're asking questions did they ask all the candidates the same questions? Was the process the same? Did all candidates have an opportunity to go before that particular political action committee? How did the vote go? You can ask all those questions, and any good political action committee that's really trying to be responsible and has integrity is going to be more than happy to answer any of those questions for a regular citizen. The third question is definitely how much money did that candidate receive for each group? And so that's something that we need to make sure that we as the citizenry are keeping track of. If one local, like as an example, this is not happening, but if one local, city council, a person running for a small city council seat in, a town of less than 100,000 people, if they're receiving thousands and thousands of dollars from a political action committee, we need to know why, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yes, campaigning is expensive, but in a town of this size, it's not going to be tens of thousands of dollars to run campaigns. It could be if you're running for maybe an at-large position, because Grand Prairie is a very large territory. If there has to be multiple signs printed, that could be something. But if it's a small little precinct or a little area of the city, and they're receiving a lot of money from a political action committee that might not be local, that could be a sign that something might be a red flag that we need to look more into as citizens here. This is just my little way of getting people to see certain things that they might not pay much attention to when it comes to campaign season. And so I believe that early voting starts on April the 19th, which is Monday, and I believe that the actual elections are May 1st. And there are several seats available. I'll post a link to everybody that's running and all the seats that are going to be on the ballot so that everybody can know what they want to do. And I will also add this. There's been a lot of discussion in the national news about voting rights, and I want to make very sure that everyone understands we're not just talking about the voting rights that you're talking about is not just for the presidency. The voting rights that we get are for all of these little bitty elections for just one city council person, or maybe for a bond package, or maybe something like that. All of these votes matter. I was involved in a conversation last week where someone was asking questions about liquor stores. And a lot of people might not realize that, that would be something that was voted on by the citizenry, the liquor, being able to sell liquor within the city limits. And I'm not bringing that up to cause controversy. My point is that was a vote that the citizenry was asked to participate in. And the reason that we have liquor stores now is because the citizenry voted that we wanted it. But, and I don't know the numbers, I would imagine that if you looked at the percentage of how many people voted versus how many people were registered to vote and that didn't vote, you might find that the percentage was more low than you would imagine. This is why local voting matters, because your vote means a lot more in a local election than it does in a federal level election, in a national election. Your vote is imperative in a local election. There could be, I believe that there was one race just recently where I think that there was 545 people that voted for one candidate. That's hardly any. So one vote with only that many voters voting means a great deal. And so we need to make sure as a citizenry that we're not only educating ourselves in how the civics of our government work, that we're educating ourselves in who is running and why, but also that we are voting to begin with. And that means voting every time that we're asked to vote and getting out there and going and showing our voice in our vote. And that is really important. And so these little bitty, I say little bitty elections because they are our local elections. Those are the least amount of voters that come out for any other election. The bigger that the election gets in terms of statewide and nationally, the more people that come out to vote. But these little elections is what is the foundation for what a lot of other things, what comes later. And so it's really important that we show our voice and that we get out there and we get registered and we get out there and we show our and we vote for our candidates. So that is my little PSA, my public service announcement for today. I hope that you found it informative. And we will be back next week with an interview with Linda Ellis. She is the superintendent of Grand Prairie ISD. I also have an interview coming up with Dwayne Strawn from the Parks and Recreation Department of Grand Prairie, and some other really, really cool people that I'm going to be interviewing from around the city. And I hope that you will tune in next week as we talk about that more. And get out there and vote. Use this weekend to take an opportunity, get to know your local candidates and understand more about them. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend.